You're listening to Remotely One, a podcast that educates, entertains, and inspires you to take your life back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a former beer rep who left the warehouse to become a voice actor and digital creator.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds awesome. Let's clock in.
The one thing about President Obama, like you got a chance to meet him. What was that in context of?
In the Working Family Summit in 2014.
Okay.
He was astoundingly impressive in a way that isn't obvious on TV, in that he clearly read his briefing. There were like 15 of us in the room, basically 14 CEOs and me. It was a long story to why I was there. But he went around the room and he knew something about everyone, including me. Now, clearly he's never heard of me before he's met me, and he must have read his briefing. But for someone to have read a briefing about 15 different people, memorized it, and then used it to go around, I was like, wow, this guy must be doing meetings like this hour and hour off. He has like some kind of encyclopedic memory.
What do you smell like, man? Did you get a chance to smell him? What kind of scent does he have? What type of scent? Is it a soft scent?
I didn't smell.
I was hoping that you were going to say he smelled like cocoa butter. Yep. He did. He had a cocoa butter scent. I was hoping you were going to say that.
There might be some of your listeners, Kaleem, are looking for that, but I'm not sure we're playing to that audience.
The president was properly moisturized.
That's great.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Remotely One. I am Rick. He is Kaleem. Hi, Kaleem.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going all right, man.
We got the giggles today.
We do have the giggles today, man. We have the giggles because we've talked about nervousness before. So I have a towel over here. I'm not going to show it because it's kind of disgusting. It's my sweat towel. And if you've ever seen that episode from Airplane, I sent this to Rick earlier. It's like,
oh yeah.
If you've ever seen that skit of when the guy's flying the plane and he's just dripping sweat and it's just pouring in his face, that's literally me because I'm so nervous to meet our guest. Although he's a hilarious person, I'm nervous today, Rick, man. I'm nervous.
Well, I'm nervous, but I'm really excited because we have a bunch of questions and I can't wait to dive into them. I want to get started right away, so let's dive in. But first, I've got a couple of housekeeping items on the agenda.
All right. What do you got?
Listeners, viewers, since you already know how to find us, do us a big favor. Please go to ratethispodcast.com/remotely one and just leave us a review. That's it. Won't take more than 10 seconds. We would love you for it. ratethispodcast.com/remotely one. Thank you. Since 2015, Remotely One has been one of the largest communities of remote work professionals with over 2,800, is that right? That many people? Yeah. 2,800 Slack members. That's crazy. 4,000 email subscribers. I love it. We're really going places. Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Who'd have thunk it, dude?
Who would have thunk it? It's free to join, so go check it out at remotely1.com. And with that out of the way, Kaleem, line us up, Bubby. What do we got?
Ooh, Baba. I mean, listen, our guest today, they are originally from London, England, and been a resident of the Bay Area for over 20 years. So you might hear an accent, you might not. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I just always thought that this was cool. Over there, they don't always use, I don't think they use PhD all the time. They use Phil, like Dr. Phil. But he's got his MPhil from the University of Oxford. For some of you who don't know, it's kind of like the Harvard of the world. He was an associate consultant at McKinsey. He was at McKinsey. This is a big one. In 2014, Rick, guess who he got a chance to meet?
If you tell him, if you tell me,
okay. I can't wait anymore. He got a chance to meet President Obama, and President Obama read his shit and knew who he was. Well, knew about him. You got a chance to meet him at the Working Family Summit. It's crazy.
I can't wait to hear about that.
Yep. He gave a TED Talk on working from home in 2017. He's an advisor to numerous remote startup companies. this person's so big, man. I've heard some people in the remote world call him the Nick Fury of remote work. Like, wow. Assemble. You know what I mean?
That's pretty cool.
I know, right? We're starting that today. People, from now on, he is the Nick Fury of remote and hybrid work research. My fault.
We're going to turn something.
He's a really bad football, aka soccer, because he's from London, but he's a really bad football player. He's been trying to get over 500 dribbles. Now, Rick, do you remember the hacky sack?
Vaguely.
I could only hacky sack up to about 15. This dude can dribble the soccer ball up to 500, he said. He's trying to get over it.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy.
We'll have to talk about that.
Absolutely. So I'm not going to mention every single publication our guest has been in, but he's been featured in Time Magazine, Business Insider, the Brookings Institute, McKinsey, CNBC, Fortune Magazine, Forbes, Bloomberg. Oh, I'm tired. Inc. Magazine, and the BBC. I couldn't continue because there are so many more.
Yes.
He's currently a professor of economics at Stanford University. Listeners and viewers, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Nicholas Bloom. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Welcome to the show, Nick.
I don't think I've ever had a welcome, that impressive.
Whoa. Calm down, Kaleem. You're going to have a coronary. Calm down.
Oh, my gosh. Whew. I'm a little excited, as you can tell.
With that out of the way, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much. I have to do this in reverse. This is fantastic. Thank you very much for having me on.
So right
you.
off the bat, I mentioned before we started recording, I've got so many questions, but I really want to know, what was your experience working with McKinsey? McKinsey, I apologize.
Yeah, it was hard work. I lasted about a year and a half there between joining and leaving. I got married. My wife got pregnant. It was pretty clear. You learn a lot. It's like you're learning in dog years in the sense of, my year and a half there is probably the same as 3 years in, the usual business world. But then you're working twice as many hours per week. I was working about 80, 90 hours a week. But, in the long run, for me, at least, it's not really I don't want to be, leaving the house at 6 a.m. and getting back at midnight every day. So at some point, I still work a lot with McKinsey, but I'm very happy I left the firm.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's just, I can't imagine working that much. That's insane. Kudos to you.
Nick, did you ever get a chance to see that show, House of Lies? About the consultants? That's the way I look at all those consulting agencies. They're just rolling around, just making things happen like that. I always just thought it was pretty luxurious gig. That's really interesting.
Yeah, some of the time you're telling clients stuff that's new. Some of the time it's basically senior management are pretty sure what's going on. But, the folks on the employees aren't, and they just, in a sense, paying someone to come in and tell them, what they should have known anyway. It's like a second guest to come in and provide assurance.
That's awesome. So, sir, we're just going to rapid fire these questions at you. So you're a professor of economics at Stanford now. And you published a paper in 2009. Yeah, we did we researched.
We dove.
We did some homework. We dove. I was like, Rick, we can't have no professor on here and not do homework. He would be upset.
Right.
So you wrote a paper titled Work-Life Balance, Management Practices and Productivity. So my question to you, Nick, is you're an economics person, What was the motivation to research the impact of work-life balance and productivity? Like, how did you even start making your way into that space?
Well, it's interesting. It links to the McKinsey experience. So when I was at McKinsey, there's kind of a view that, look, there's a right and a wrong way to manage companies. And the right way is not that surprising. It's like collect data, have monitoring. When things go wrong, you figure out why they go wrong and try and improve them. You reward high performers, you promote them, etc. But there seemed to be no agreement on things like paternity leave, maternity leave, part-time work from home. Some firms are super generous, give you enormous amounts of time off. Others are really harsh. And I had this question, look, which is right? So we started to collect data on around 800 companies We looked at performance, how they're growing, how much money they're making. We looked at how well managed they are. And we also looked at work-life balance, how they treated their staff. And we found a very strong correlation between all of them. Basically, high-performing firms that make a lot of money, that grow fast, tend to be, not surprisingly, better managed, but they also treat their employees better. They're more flexible. And when you start talking to them, it turns out, there's a two-way street here. If you're nice to your employees, they tend to perform better for you. And if you're well organized, you can afford to do it. You can imagine if you're chaos every day, you go into the office, things aren't going, you're always struggling to meet deadlines. You're shouting at people, you're saying, look, right. We got a deadline, we've left it too late. You got to stay till midnight tonight. Tomorrow's leave is canceled. On the other hand, if you're really well organized, successful, profitable, you can afford to say, hey, look, tomorrow it's your kids, they're off school. Why don't you work from home for the day?
Yeah, and this is in 2009. So you hear all that, listeners and viewers, work-life balance matters. It does matter.
I was, partly into this. I'm one of 4 kids. Both my parents worked. You can hear I'm a Brit. I grew up in London. I'm 50, so my childhood was in the 80s. But back then they would take it in turns to work they both worked for the British government, so they would take it in turns to work from home for the day. And back then it was seen as it wasn't seen as a great thing to do, to be honest. It was before computers. So working from home in the 80s was like shuffling pieces of paper and carrying them in and out. And I was always intrigued as to how that worked out. And, now work from home is seen as this impressive thing that elites and, CEOs, managers, professionals do. But back then it was pretty much a backwater policy. In fact, the word telecommuting, only, Jack Nilles coined that word in 1974, I think it was. So, it was a pretty early stage back then.
Yeah. I actually reached out to Jack. Hopefully we can get him on the show. That would be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Fast forward in 2017, you checked out your TED Talk. You gave a TED Talk, and it was called Go Ahead, Tell Your Boss You're Working From Home. Can you tell us a little bit about what you explained in that as far as the beginning of your, kind of the beginning of your research, although you kind of, started the research in roughly 2015 or 14. Can you kind of just, tell our listeners and viewers, what was that research project and what did you start seeing there?
Yeah, so that was really the big study I did before the pandemic that kind of hit the headlines. And that was what, got me to meet Obama. So teaching in Stanford in 2010, I had a student in my class called James Liang. James Liang was the co-founder and initial CEO, and at that point, chairman of Trip.com. They're one of the big 3 travel agents in the world. They're like Expedia, but they're more Asia focused. So, sitting in the back of my class is this super successful, I didn't know initially, businessman, CEO. And him and his CEO, Jane Sun, they wanted to basically figure out whether work from home worked. And Jane and I, cooked up this idea to run what's called a randomized controlled trial. So they took 500 volunteers that all volunteered to work from home. And then they drew a ping pong ball out of an urn and it said even. And if you were born on an even day of the month, so the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, you then got to work from home for 4 days a week. And if it said odd, you had to come in every day of the month, every day of the week.
I would have to go in every day.
Yeah, so they ran what was basically a massive science experiment. And we tracked these guys. We collected enormous amounts of data, all kinds of stuff. And the bottom line result was, I should step back and say, Trip's view was folks working from home would goof off. Their take on it back then was, look, what we're going to do is going to save a ton of office space. They're in Shanghai. It's really expensive. But maybe people are going to goof off. They're going to, watch TV. There's that joke about the 3, enemies of work from home are the bed, the fridge, and the television. And they're going to fall victim to one or many of them.
I never heard that one. I never heard that one before.
That's great.
It's like the 3 work from home devils, as they were. So, Trip's view was, we're going to save a lot of office space, but these folks are going to goof off. How much they're going to goof off, we don't know. That's where we run the experiment. What they found, which was amazing, was they didn't goof off. They're actually 13% more efficient working from home, which is like massive. That is almost a day a week extra. They also found quit rates were down by 50%. The only negative is folks also saw slower rates of promotion. So
back to the quit, you're going quick there. Back to the quit rate. Did you say quit rate dropped by 50%? So it wasn't 50% of quit rate. You're saying that whatever the rate was before, it dropped by 50%.
It halved, which is again huge. Yeah.
That's
13%
massive.
productivity increase in productivity, and 50%. You all hearing these stats, and this research
That's
was
amazing.
done when? What year?
2010 to 2012.
Wow.
Wow.
So
that's
that was
incredible.
big news. You're right. You
Yes.
know, and we got a lot of media coverage now going back, 10, 15 years. I was in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Economist, a bunch of stuff back in, 2012, 13, 14. I met the president. I did a TEDx talk. But who could tell whether it was just one big experiment and how general it was? Even I, the person that had worked in this, was never quite sure how much this would extend out beyond this one example. And then obviously the pandemic happened, and it looks like actually that was about right. I mean, we know from the pandemic experience, people have been more efficient working from home.
Wow.
So the motivation for that study, just to kind of give me a little bit more context, the motivation for that study was that they wanted to save money.
Yes. So Trip owned really expensive offices in Shanghai. These things, think of New York or San Francisco or, Chicago. These places cost, they were a bomb. And they had thousands of folks in call centers, support staff, administrative employees in the office. The dream was if you had them work from home 4 days a week, each team comes in on one day. Team A comes in on Monday, team B comes in on Tuesday, etc. So you can cut office space by 80%, save a lot of money. And they kind of had this balancing act in mind. They said, look, we're going to save a lot of money by reducing office space, but we're going to lose money because they're going to goof off. How much are they going to goof off? Which is why when the experiment comes out and find not only do they not lose money, they made, because they're 13% more efficient, and then they made even more because the quit rates were down. They calculated at the end, each work from home employee was making the firm about $2,000 more a year.
Oh my
Cast
God.
your mind back. That's 2010. That's China. Compare it now for the U. These are many thousands of dollars of extra profit per employee you had working from home.
Wow.
Jeez.
So we're talking 2010 roughly, okay? Fast forward, it's 2023 now. There seems to be a gap between what employees want and what employers are offering them. Employees want 3 days off a week at least, but employers are only willing to part with 2.5. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So we've been surveying actually 10,000 Americans a month since the beginning of the pandemic. So we've probably spoken to a couple 100,000 people by now. And you really robustly see there's a big spread. So about 30% of Americans want to work fully remotely. They want to be at home 5 days a week. They tend to be more middle-aged folks with younger kids. There's 20% that want to be in every day. Are the exact opposite, and they tend to be like my students are, coming out of Stanford, for example, folks in their 20s early on, they're sharing apartments. And then the rest of us, the other 50% want to be hybrid. If you look at the average, the typical American wants to work from home 2.5 days a week, maybe, Monday, Friday, plus maybe one other day. Employers are not offering quite as much, and it looks like that gap is now flatlined out. So obviously what's being offered now is way better than pre-pandemic. So pre-pandemic work from home is incredibly rare. Now a typical company, probably for most of your listeners, typically are offering Monday, Friday at home. Some are offering more, some are offering less, but that's where it's kind of flatlined out. Most employees want a little bit more. So this is where this gap is still there.
Do you think that number would be affected, or would it be higher if the employees had 100% choice?
Well, here's how the thing works out. As an economist, labor markets work very well. So look, if you really want to work fully remotely and your firm is forcing you back in 5 days a week, ask to move teams or just move jobs. So right now in the US, there's a lot of different companies offering every which way. In fact, I was just talking to a startup earlier this morning, and they are fully remote. So look, if you really want a fully remote job and you're being hauled back, just quit. I mean, this is America. There's freedom of choice. If you're fully remote, there are, many, many job ads. Now, you may have to take a pay cut. It's turning out now in 2023, the number of fully remote jobs being offered is slowly falling back down. From LinkedIn data, what we see is fully remote jobs have about 4 times as many applications per job as ones that are hybrid. But, this is how the market works. There's more supply of people that want to be fully remote in the US now than there are jobs. But there are still plenty, in America, from our data, you reckon there's about 25 million Americans working fully remotely. That's a huge number. About 10% of all people work, 10-15%. But yeah, if you want to do that, that's what I would do. If you want to be hybrid, Most professional managerial jobs are hybrid. Very few are getting people in 5 days a week. When you read on the news that Elon Musk or Jamie Dimon or David Solomon have said in their firms, you got to come back full time. When I've looked at the data and spoken to people in these companies in practice, that's almost never happening. What happens in practice is they're going in 4 days a week and they're typically working from home on Friday. And you hear a lot of individual employees say, I've said I'm going to quit if I'm hauled, forced to come in 5 days a week. And the managers have said, okay, don't tell anyone about it. But, as long as you get your work done, you can stay home Friday, maybe Monday.
I was just going to ask real quickly, do you think that the gap that we were discussing a moment ago, does that significantly change from industry to industry?
Yes. So, ground zero for remote work is tech. Actually, it turns out after tech, banking, finance, law, what I call kind of financial and business services are really high. That's one end. They're looking typically in those industries, you're seeing almost 3 days a week, 2.5, 3 days a week working from home. So it's pretty much half time. At the other extreme, like food, accommodation, transport, manufacturing, construction's really low. I mean, it's not that surprising, right? If you work in Chipotle or McDonald's, it's very hard. And even if even if middle senior management at McDonald's say don't have to come in every day because the frontline staff and the people running the stores are, you kind of feel like you have to. I mean, they don't come in every day, but senior office staff, even in McDonald's, are probably in 4 days a week.
Makes sense.
There's something I want to talk about. I think you and I have debated this once before, but you're a researcher, so I'm sure you're quite literal, but how would you define hybrid?
Well, one comment is the word hybrid didn't exist until about mid to late 2020. So just to set the scene for everyone listening, I've been working on work from home now for 20 years. Up until 2019, basically before the pandemic, it was pretty much all about fully remote. So when I talk to companies who'd be like, we want to get rid of this office. We have an office in Cleveland. It's just too expensive. We're going to shut it down. We're going to let everyone there work fully remotely. That was the whole discussion. It's about real estate.
Dropbox was the only hybrid company maybe in like 18 or 19 maybe? And
maybe. They're pretty weird. I mean, what you tend to see is there's massive negative stigma about it. So what happened is companies might have said in 2018, 2019, say, look, you can work from home Monday, Friday. What they also didn't say officially, but you knew, was if you actually took that up, it's going to damage your promotion. And so that then led to this two-tier system, and not very many people took it up. The world totally changed in 20. It's like the asteroid strike and the dinosaurs. The pandemic completely changed the world of work from home, and the future of work completely changed course. So now,
and also generally what I've heard too, I remember before the pandemic was, because like in the web development space, a lot of times you'd have people that would go into the office Monday through Friday, and then you would just have a subset that was 100% remote.
Exactly.
And that was like the only hybrid-ish. And I don't even know if I heard that term used to explain that position, but the few people that I did hear the term from before 2020, that was it. You either went into the office Monday through Friday, or you were like, an IT professional and you were 100% remote. So yeah, you're totally right. Like the definition that we know today is new. So based on all your research, how would you define it based on today?
Oh, do you think I was doing my best to avoid the question?
Yeah.
I was like classic politician.
Let me ask the question. How many days per week would you say in office versus out office would calculate to hybrid?
Okay, so I give you some data points.
Okay.
The most common form of hybrid, and we know this from the Flex Index, is 3 days a week in the office, 2 at home, and those typical days are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So if you're looking for plain vanilla, like the classic, that is probably not the majority. Something like 35% of managers, professionals. So it's the most common, but it's definitely not the majority, are like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office, Monday, Friday at home. Another very common pattern is 4 days in the office and Friday at home. That's like Disney. And then there's a bunch that are doing 3 at home. They tend to be Monday, Friday, always the home days. Then pick your choice of, one other, typically Thursday. So those are common plans. And then there's a bunch of other firms that have a different setup. They let you choose. Now, the choice in some ways is good. So imagine it's our firm and we all get to choose. And you like, some weeks you come in Tuesday, Wednesday, other weeks you come in Thursday, Friday. The downside I hear from talking to hundreds of managers and professionals over choice is the reason I choose, I want to come in the office to see my colleagues. Basically, if you survey people, they want to come in to work with others, to socialize with others. And it's kind of tricky if I come in, on Monday, Tuesday, Kaleem, you're in on Wednesday, Thursday, and Rick's in on Friday. I have this sense of I came into the office and I spent all day Zooming other people and why did I come in? So there are some tensions there. Do you let people choose, but they don't get the benefit of coming in and working with others? Or do you coordinate and restrict choice? And again, if you go back to 2019, think what happened in 2019. Typically, you have to be in the office for 50 hours a week. We coordinated on Monday to Friday, kind of 9 or 8 till 5. So hybrid Tuesday to Thursday, say, isn't that different from what we did pre-pandemic. It's just allowing you a bit more time at home. So, that's the vanilla version. But look, as with ice cream, vanilla is the most popular flavor, but, it's probably only 10, 15% of sales.
So with all of this kind of return to work mandates, we talked about the gap earlier. And it seems to me, I bet you if you were to ask employees, they would probably define hybrid as probably choice and probably, I don't know, 2 times in office. But if you were asked someone from leadership, they would say hybrid is something else. But what do you think the true driving forces, behind leadership wanting their employees back to the office, although there's been so much research to prove that people are more productive. Companies saw record-breaking numbers and revenue numbers during the pandemic when people were remote. So just based on your research and your thoughts, what are leaders telling you as to why they want their people back into the office? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, partly the media, to be honest, the media misrepresents a little bit as to what's happening. So it sells many more newspapers and many more clicks to have some extreme story exec X tells everyone to, haul their asses back in. What I'm seeing and what I talk to managers about is mostly they're now, for professionals, for grads, mostly they want them in 2-3 days a week, sometimes 4. The stories they say, which I have a bunch of sympathy with, is look, there's mentoring, building culture, to innovation. These things are best done face to face, but you don't need to be in every day. So a lot of managers are saying, look, I'm fine with you working from home Monday, Friday, just do want you in, 3 days a week. A lot of employees, particularly younger employees, are actually very happy with that. So where the real tension is and where, the mistakes are happening is where you have somebody say, age 37, has got 2 young kids at home, lives out in some suburb. Their employer told them 2 years ago they're going to be fully remote, and now they just changed their mind. That causes enormous problems. If I was that employee and you really don't like it, you can tell your employer, look, I want to change teams, or if it's getting really bad, maybe go look for another job.
Yeah.
I don't see, Kaleem, to answer, in the aggregate data, the number of days that Americans are working from home is about 25% and has been flat at that level since late 2022. So in the sense it's a media narrative, for every company that's reported in the news as hauling people back into the office, there are other companies that don't get picked up or that are saying to save money, we're closing offices down altogether.
Very good point.
It's very selective. And so I've seen this is basically flat. If you look at the Castle, office swipe card data, how many people are swiping into offices, that's been flat. There hasn't been really a big return to the office since fall of 2022. That's, going back 9 months. So this is the new normal. And the new normal is for probably most professionals, you can kind of pick your menu. It's like you can pick where to work in the US. If you want to work in Cleveland and live in Cleveland, go and work in a company that operates out of there. If you want to be 5 days a week remote, there's many, many millions of jobs that offer that. You just may have to change firms.
You have to change. And you made a really good point earlier about managers. How many people are actually enforcing? Managers are kind of stuck in a very difficult spot because you have senior leadership telling them to do something. They may not really want to do that thing, but they're told to do it, and then they have their employees below them. A lot of managers aren't even I saw some stats about enforcing the return to office. Everyone back to the office 5 days a week. Shh, you can come in 3 days. That's fine.
Yes.
So that's what's going on. Right. And then, with startups, like you said, really cool point you made about a media kind of narrative. A lot of startups are fully remote, and they're going to mature into larger companies at some point. So that will be interesting to see over the next 10 years how things are looking, because, you have startups, which are mostly, a lot of them are going fully remote. So it's just really interesting, the difference between what's being reported in the actuals. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, the startup line, to give you, again, if I was starting a company, I would be fully remote. And, unless you look, if you're starting, a taco business, surely you got to be in person. But if it's a software, an HR company or business services or law or something, you'd be fully remote. What we see is that these companies that are fully remote still tend to meet in person, maybe every other month. But what they do is, the founder's house, the folks come into town for a couple of days, they meet up and leave again. They have what's called kind of retreats. So you do meet each other. The three of us are working together. We may meet in Albuquerque next month for, 3 days, so that we've all met. You build those bonds, you chat, you go out for a beer, you go out for dinner, and then, you're remote again for the next couple of months. The juncture that gets kind of hard is when you're hit about 10, 25 employees, that kind of size. A lot of startups and also venture capital firms and banks, when I've talked to them, kind of like at that point, some firms to start to migrate to some in-person days. And you're right, that is a hard decision. Say I've started a firm, I've done really well. I've been growing for 5 years. I've now hit 57 employees. I'm now thinking, look, I maybe want one office and I want folks in Tuesday, Wednesday. That's actually a very hard thing to navigate. And that's where, the thought has to happen as to, do I do this? And, does that mean that 5 people are hired in Argentina? How does it work out with them?
That's a really great point. I want to circle back to something that Kaleem said a little bit about younger companies maturing into larger companies and how that kind of ties into the growth of communities. Kaleem and I are both from a really small town up north. We were both from Bangor, Maine. And
207, baby. Shout out.
That's it. Stephen King, baby. That town has seen over the last, 2 decades or so, has seen a resurgence in the interest in commercial space in downtown. When we were growing up, when Kaleem and I were kids, there was nothing happening. It was all but abandoned because of shopping malls and urban sprawl and all that. But now we're seeing, and I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about this donut effect, because that's not happening in larger cities, and people are actually moving out into the suburbs, and nobody really knows what to do with all this commercial space in these large, what were once vibrant downtown communities. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So there is something called the donut. This is an American donut, which is, round the edges, hollow in the center. There's actually a British version that has jello in the center. Anyway, we're not talking about the British donut. So the reason we talk about it is I have data from the United States Postal Service, incredibly rich data on the mail file. So every time you change address, they update it. So you know where people are moving by zip code by month. And what we've seen is about 1 million Americans since the beginning of the pandemic have left the center of big cities. I think Chicago, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, New York. We looked at the 12 largest U.S. cities. They've left the centers. Most of them have moved out to the suburbs of the same city. So the classic thought experiment is I'm in San Francisco. I was a techie or a banker that used to have to go in 5 days a week. I lived in the center of town. Now it's 2022. My employer is telling me I got to come in 2 days a week. So I'm thinking, look, I can put up with a much longer commute, but I'd really like a home office. I've got to be working from home for 3 days and maybe a bit of space in a backyard. So I move out to the suburbs, an hour's drive from the center. And we're seeing that, large. In fact, I've been working with MasterCard. We're seeing that across cities, across Europe, Australia, New Zealand. So This is pretty much a global phenomenon. You can see people moving out. Now, for Bangor, Maine, this is a much smaller town. I don't know how, like 50, 100,000 or something?
No,
it's probably 30, like 30 or 40.
Yeah, 30,000.
Very small.
So these middle and smaller towns are actually, a lot of them are benefiting. They don't really have, the center and the suburb. Even if you're in the suburbs, you're still 20 minutes, 10 minutes from the center of town. And in some senses, what's happening is folks are leaving. So I mentioned that people are leaving, say, central San Francisco. About 60% of them are going to the suburbs of the same big city, but the other 40% are going somewhere else. And about half of those folks are going to smaller towns, other places around. So, I know San Francisco better, but look, you could live, 2 hours away in Central Valley. You could buy a much bigger piece of space. And then if you've got to be once a week in San Francisco, you just have a horrible commute 1 day a week and you're in and out. And so Americans, it's kind of, it's strange in a way. We had 40 years of urbanization. So in 1980, the center of American cities were kind of scary, crime-infested places that not a lot of people wanted to live in. If you looked at central New York, I remember visiting as a kid, and there was two armed guards with open carry guns on McDonald's in Times Square. Now it's a really expensive area. Up until 2019, everyone was moving back into the center. The pandemic's undone about 10 years of that. It's kind of taken us back to 2010. It's moved some folks back. I actually don't think it's even that bad, because there are people that have to live in the center of big cities. Who are they? They're essential service workers. So if I work in McDonald's, I got to go in every day. If I'm a police, fire, nursing, security, street cleaning, etc. And if the center of cities are a little bit cheaper, it's easier for those folks to live in the center. And it makes sense for techies, bankers, others to move out to the suburbs or to Bangor, Maine.
Shout out to Maine. And hopefully some of this empty commercial real estate, hopefully some developers and politicians and lawmakers make things a little bit easier for people to rezone things. And maybe we start seeing people move back into the city because they can afford it. And then they can actually walk around town, so maybe the donut effect will go out, and then maybe that will cause downtowns to redevelop and rethink how they can use the space, and people who enjoy being in the city. Because look, I mean, we're always going to enjoy being around other people, right? Like we're a tribal species. So it will be interesting to see what happens over the next few years for sure.
Definitely. Well, Nick, this is my favorite part of the show, and I'm sure Kaleem would agree. Can you share with us a comical or inspiring moment that happened to you during your entire remote experience?
I'll give you two quick ones, actually. So one is my wife's from Scotland, from Glasgow, and my other two kids play the bagpipes. And I don't know if you've ever heard them, but they are unbelievably loud. I mean, the bagpipes kick out. Think of the trumpet with an amplifier shoved on the front of it. And there was one important Zoom call I was taking, and they kind of started up the bagpipes in the room next door. I'm in a classic West Coast wood frame, wood house. There's an earthquake zone. There's no bricks in this house. So there is no soundproofing. And the person on the call was like, what is that noise? Is there somebody got is there a siren, an alarm going off in the background? And I was like, do I explain or do I just mute myself? If it's too complicated to explain, there's two people playing the bagpipes. I just muted it and hoped that, no one could figure it out. And then the other incident is
that's my son, William Wallace, back there. Don't worry about him.
It just sounded so unprofessional. There's bagpipers. Like, what, where are you? Are you in some Highlands Park? And then the other is that my desk at home looks out down the front path. And I was giving, a Zoom presentation to a company actually about work from home. And somebody comes to drop something and they need a signature and they can see me through the window. And I think, the poor DHL person thinks, obviously, I don't know what they think I'm doing, maybe watching Netflix. And they're there and they're waving and I can see them and they can see me. But I'm in the middle of, presenting to someone and they're just getting more and more frantic. Like, what is this crazy person doing? Just ignoring me. But you can't in the middle of it.
You couldn't wave back.
Well, I had 30 people that were actually, they happened to be in Europe. I had 30 people in Denmark. I was trying to figure out, do I just say stop? I'm in the middle of a talk. I've got to go and sign for a package. So my wife was saying, you got to have a little sign saying I'm on a Zoom call. Hold it up and put it back down. But I feel bad. It feels like I need to close my curtains because otherwise I don't want to be rude to people. But it's hard if you're in the middle.
Oh, my God.
That's a tough spot to be in.
I'd be banging on the wiggle. Why aren't you listening to me?
They'd be like the DHL person being that crazy guy in 852. He just, I don't know what's up with that guy, but.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that.
It's great. It's great.
Dr. Nick Bloom, thank you for joining us. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yeah, before I do that, I should say you guys are so impressive. You've been on the remote track for so long. It's, there's not many others that have been so much ahead of the curve as well. So it's lovely to be on the show.
Did you hear that, Kaleem? We just got shouted out by Nick Bloom. Dr. Nick Bloom shouted us out.
I'm doing my Chris Farley. I can't handle it. We just got an endorsement by Dr. Nicholas Bloom.
Oh, boy.
I don't get called doctor very often, It's like people But yeah, if anyone, before you make me embarrassed, if I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, actually, so I try and post Yeah, I just basically, I mean, Kaleem and I have been long-term LinkedIn and Twitter friends. I tend to post data. I'm a real data nerd, so some chart, Yeah.
We need more faculty out there. I had a higher ed background as well. Thank you so much for what you're doing, because we need more people like yourself giving us data. Really appreciate you being on the show, sir. This was awesome, and I can't wait to make it out to San Francisco so we can grab a coffee, man. It's been great, man. Really appreciate it.
Exactly. Or something even stronger, but thank you very much for having me on the show.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, I'm coming too.
Reconfirm. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Nick. I appreciate the time.
Okay, cheers, guys. Thanks again.
You've been listening to Remotely One. Visit us at remotely1.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.